Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Legal and General Just Covered podcast, where we talk to intermediaries, advisors and other key people in our industry about their views and opinions around protection. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and we are so privileged today to be joined by one of our esteemed colleagues, Barry. So welcome, Barry.
Thank you for having me along.
No, thank you. And today you're going to share a bit about your own story to kind of help and inspire listeners, but also talk us through maybe some of the ins and outs of what it's like when life maybe throws a curveball that you're not expecting. So yeah, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself, your role at L&G to start us off, and then we can go into maybe some of the hardships that you've gone through over the last.
Yeah. I'm a performance manager at Legal and General, and what that means is I talk to our business partners and their advisors and help them find the best ways to protect customers.
It's a really important role, that, isn't it, Barry? And you've done it for a long, long time, and we've worked together in a previous life, haven't we, along the years. A really important sort of way you work with some of our closest partners out there. So what was the main things of your role that you really enjoy?
Well, number one, I love working with advisors. So I love I always think if you can have a conversation with someone and as a consequence, they do something different and then that passes on to someone else, then that's a good day, isn't it? So you have one interaction like that every single day where you speak to someone, you give them help, you give them some guidance and they pass that on. And as a consequence, that customer does something different, especially if it means that they protect themselves. I think that's a wonderful thing to do every day.
100%. And I worked for one of the partners that you work with, and definitely your name is well known across the industry for being that supportive help and really getting advisors engaged with the products and actually how to, as you said, tee it up to create change. In terms of yourself, why is that such a passion of yours, and where has that stemmed from?
Well, if I go back far enough, and I don't know if this was the actual reason, but many years ago, I had a very good friend when I was advisor, and he was just about to get married, and we'd arranged all his life insurance, and I was disappearing to another wedding, funny enough, a few days before his own, and he wouldn't mind me telling you this, and I rang him up the day before his wedding and said, "Look, mate, we've done all your life insurance, put everything in place. Why don't you just put this in force? What are you hanging around with? Just get it done." And he did that with a little bit of guidance. I went to his wedding, we had a lovely day. And then 2.5-3 weeks later on his honeymoon, sadly he passed away. And I've never forgotten that. And I know it's not a very cheery story, but it's a real drive for me because had I not made that telephone call, had we not had the conversation to start with, but had I not made that telephone call, his life, his family's life would have been really, really different. So I just think you've always got an opportunity to show care because it's really easy to talk about all the other things in our industry, consumer duty, products, processes, all of that. But the heart of that is a customer and your interaction with that customer. And it's your interaction with that customer that makes a difference on the outcome. If we think that a customer comes in and talks to us as advisors, as professionals, and they're always going to do the same thing before they interact with us, we have no control over that, then what's the purpose? If they come in and you go, well, actually, by having a really great conversation with this person, I can make a difference and make them see, without judgment, make them see the world differently. And as a consequence, make a decision that they choose to protect their family. Well, that's brilliant. And that's all about care. That's all about authentic is a word that's massively overused in our industry. In anything in life, people say, you've got to be authentic. But what does it mean? What it means is you demonstrate true care for the individual, the one person sat opposite you at that point, and you give them all of yourself. You give them all of your time. You're not thinking about what's going to happen next, what happened before, the next customer, what's happening next week. You just got them in front of you and in understanding them and what they want for their lives and their family and the people they love the most.
That's so powerful. And I think, as you said, there's so many things going on in everybody's minds, and especially some of the intermediaries or advisors listening to this will think, I'm running a business, I've got my own family, I've got, as you said, the next appointment, I've got consumer duty. And I think you're so right, actually using that time with a customer to maybe switch off from the outside world and just really focusing on them is probably a much nicer way to operate anyway, isn't it?
But it's a question of whether people always do it. Do you treat the person sat opposite you, your customer, as if they were one of your family. As if they were the person you loved most in the world. How would you want to be treated? And I think if that was your family member, we wouldn't talk to them sometimes like we talk to customers. I think we talk to customers and give and offer them the opportunity to give us coping strategies. Yeah. How would you cope if? Yeah. What have you got in place? And, it's all, well, I'll tell you how I'll cope. I'll find reasons. In fact, you've asked me. You've given me an invitation for me to tell you how I'll get by. And then they tell you things about death in service and employer benefits and how they'll save money or sell the house. You don't get that if you ask a customer what they want to happen. I just don't think we're aspirational enough. If you sit down and say, right, what do you want for your wife? What do you want for your family, your children? If you were to die, if you're ill, if you're off work. Because then they give you an aspiration. They give you something over here. I want this up here. That's what I want. I want my child sat on a gold throne. I want to have a Ferrari. I just wanted to be able to stay in the home. And I do this all the time with advisors. And we do it with customers. And I listen to customer calls where advisors are doing it. And the difference in outcomes when you start asking about aspirations and what people want, and then get curious and understand why they want it. And what they're doing when they give you those answers is they're giving you a public commitment. They're saying out loud and really significantly to themselves that this is what I want.
They're galvanizing that opinion. They're giving you that information, but they're also convincing themselves, if they weren't convinced, that that's what they want.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it just there about finding out why they want that aspiration. So delving that a little bit further, asking the extra question, if you like. Yeah. I'm hearing that's really, really important in your day-to-day role in terms of what you're talking to advisors about.
Yeah, it's key. It's absolutely everything. It's the number one thing I talk about. And mindset.
Yeah.
How do you see? What do you see yourself? What motivates you as an advisor to do a good job? Because that's how you see yourself. That's your identity. And then, like as with customers, exactly the same thing. You behave in a way attached to your identity. Don't you? Yeah. If I'm an advisor that makes sure that somebody gets a mortgage, guess what? That's what they'll get. If I'm an advisor that makes sure that someone gets in a home and stays in it in every single eventuality, my identity is a little bit different. How I see myself, how I see my role. And it's the same with customers. If I'm a father who wants to make sure that whatever happens, my daughter stays in the home and never has to worry about money and gets to go to university and gets to do all the things I'd want them to do, that is a world away from coping, isn't it?
And it's that aspiration, like you said. It's not how would you cope, it's what do you want to happen? What's that aspiration? Where do you think that should be? Yeah. And that's where you start from. Now, also, I'm intrigued as well in that you mentioned around the story about your friend earlier on. And we had a couple of episodes ago, probably actually 4 or 5 episodes ago, where we talked about the importance of telling stories. Yeah. So I'm hearing perhaps early in your career, you would use that story, am I right? Until obviously you've gone through other things that we'll obviously delve into later on in this episode.
Yeah, to an extent. Yep. And I think that gives you passion.
Yep.
But I would want to understand the customer story. Because whilst my story is engaging, or the story of people we all know, because we all know people are ill, and we all know people have died when they shouldn't have died, and people have coped and struggled. But there's nothing more compelling than the story of the person you've got in front of you. And when you say, I regularly ask advisors to ask customers really simple questions. And one of them is, what do you want to happen for your family and your home and yourself if you're ill because you're still around? And what's more likely to happen, do you think? You're more likely to get ill or you're more likely to die? Now, I've never met anyone who said die. They always say ill. And then sometimes I've noticed what advisors do is they go, yes, you're absolutely right. You are more likely to get, and they'll rattle some stats off. 1 in 2 get cancer and all that. And they've missed an opportunity to get the customer's story. And the question you ask to get the customer's story is always the same. Why do you feel like that? What makes you say that you're more likely to get ill? And every time I ask that, they will tell you their story about a person they knew, about somebody, a family member. And all the time they're doing that, like we were saying about before, that's them buying into the concept that they can understand the reality of why they need to be protected.
Well, they're living it in that story, aren't they? And if you're living something, you're going to understand it, you're going to appreciate it.
Yeah, and just even the simple questions, well, what would you want in that situation? And nobody goes, do you know what, I just want to get by. What I'd really like is to go to food banks. I don't want my daughter going to university. They never say that. What they say is, I want everything. I want choices. And when you protect a customer, it's the world apart. It's the difference between the choices you get by being protected and the choices that are taken away from you when you're not protected. Because nobody ever wants to talk about this stuff. I was just reading the latest Mintel survey. And of the people that don't protect themselves, nearly 60% of them say, they just don't like to talk about it. It makes them feel uncomfortable. Right? Which is ridiculous. They're like, if I talk about it, it might just happen. And they move away from it because it feels like pain, and people like to move away from pain. It's the same reason people don't take out wills. It's the same reason people don't fund their pensions. It's all the same thinking. If I don't think about it, I'll get to it and it'll be all right. And of course, we know it won't be all right. We know it will be a struggle. There's 7.5 million people on an NHS waiting list. I want private healthcare, thanks very much. There's 2.5 million people in long-term sick. Nearly 6 million people getting universal credit. I bet if you went back to them and said, long before that happened, if any of this happens to you, and I know there's a multitude of reasons these things happen, but if this happens, what do you want? I bet you they didn't say we want to be on the NHS waiting list.
No. And it's interesting, even the ones that take protection, they tend to wish they'd taken more. You then got, so it's like, it's one of those, isn't it? People won't take it at all and they wish they had, but then I guess the interesting angle from advisors as well, and definitely I'm thinking of one of the claims that when I was an advisor, I had somebody sadly claim on critical illness policy, and that's the one thing they said. It was like, I'm glad we took your advice, if only we'd taken it even more, because they decided to go to budget, they couldn't afford it, and really just if only they'd had even more at that point, and they got by fine. But some people don't have anything at all. Fundamental
principle of greed. That's all right. We all want more. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's where you have that conversation. Don't discover you want more when it's too late. Mm-hmm. Find out what you want before that, and then see how you fund it.
So thinking about your own situation, and Barry, if we come on to that, because you've just mentioned, choices are so important, and actually they can really make or break a situation, I guess, for an individual and their family. Do you want to just talk about the choices you'd put in place for yourself and what that meant to you?
What, before I became ill?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I was an advisor, so I saw the need in it, really. Yeah. So my financial choices were driven by some of the experiences I've had and the conversations I was having with customers. It would have been really remiss of me, wouldn't it? And certainly not authentic and showing any care if I was happy to talk to people about this and what they should do and why it's important to them, help them make decisions, if I wasn't adequately protected myself.
And we talk so much about advisors having plans in place, don't we? Because how can you be passionate enough? How can you have that gusto to talk about it if you haven't got it in place yourself?
Yeah, you go to the gym instructor who looks fit, don't you? That's the one. You go, right, he knows what he's doing. He looks like it, or they know what they're doing. And everyone's situation is different, and it's not for me to make judgment. I think we also live sometimes in a world where there is too much judgment. And what we should be doing is seeking to understand. The phrase I always attach to everything is seek to understand, not convince. And if you enter every opinion, people hate being sold to, hate being told they've got to be had things. I might be an advisor, but it doesn't mean that I have to say, I recommend you do this. All I want to do is understand your circumstances, not put myself in your shoes, but understand what you would do given that circumstance. And that relaxes a whole conversation. The shoulders drop when you have that conversation and you're not trying to sell something to someone. You truly understand, and they can sense that you truly understand. You're showing empathy, understanding. And then once you do that, the decisions they make are decisions they made with your guidance, not decisions you demanded that they make. And we hear loads of customers saying, why did you take it out? My advisor told me I had to. I don't want that answer. Why did I take it out? Because I want to make sure that my children always get to stay in the family home and they get all the choices when they get to 18 that I want them to have. That's the answer you should be getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that value piece, isn't it? It makes it last.
Yeah.
And so many advisors, I think, don't always realise the importance they have in that value. And we've talked about this a lot in different episodes and things. It's trying to, like you say, sort of convince them or move their psyche with that belief in the fact that they are important. How many other people are going to talk to customers in the way and really understand them in the way you're talking about and caring for them? How many other advisors are going to do that? Yeah. But a mortgage advisor, a wealth advisor, that they have got a huge opportunity to be able to do that with their customers and really delve into what really makes them tick and really make sure that the outcome's the right one.
Yeah, because that's creating an advocate, isn't it? So value for me is delivering something that someone didn't expect they were going to get when they walked in and came to see you. So they may be coming to see me because I'm a wealth advisor and think it's going to be about money or an annuity or anything. But you have a really great conversation with them, and as a consequence, you over-deliver on their expectation. That's creating value. And then right there, you've got an advocate who goes away and goes, do you know what? Do you know what that person did, that advisor did? I think you should go and see it. I say you want every single one of your customers feel. If they don't feel like that, you've probably under-delivered.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think as well, when you're in that moment, you feel if you're doing it. You get a feeling, don't you? You can tell from I don't know how to describe it, but you just know from the connection in the room whether you've achieved that or not. Definitely from my experience and in giving advice, you just sense that you feel good, and you sense that they're walking out of that meeting, and you've really added to their kind of life go forward.
Yeah.
And when we think about, you mentioned, I guess people listening, we thinking, was Barry ill? Because you mentioned a little moment ago before I got ill. Don't just tell us a little bit about your story and what the cover meant to you at the time.
Yeah, happily. So I hope I look relatively fit, I'm fit, I eat healthy, I do all the things you're meant to do. But a couple of years ago, I was sat at my desk and I had a rather sharp pain, to say the least, that was in the back of my neck. And before you know it, I'm rolling around on the floor, not feeling very well. Never got headaches, never had any issues, always fit, always healthy. And it was right there, and I sort of didn't know what to do with myself. I'm ringing my wife, who's in the NHS, saying, I think you've got to come home, I'm not well. Anyway, I get rushed off to hospital, and they say they think I'm going to be okay. They think it's a couple of other things. It's related to low blood pressure and a low heart rate, which are things associated with being fit. And they put me in a scanner, and it turned out that I'd had a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage, rather somewhat out of the blue. And it was, for someone who wasn't expecting, you don't expect to get ill. Illness is utterly indiscriminate. And that's what I learned through that. And there's a few moments, I won't talk you through all of what happened, but there's a few moments that really strongly resonate when I go back and think about that time. Because I'm fit and healthy now. And the moment that I think of most of when I reflect on it is the moment that the surgeon, the consultant came in and said, I'm really sorry you've had a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage. Because I thought I was going to die. And genuinely then thought I was going to die, and my wife was with me. And it's the words I said to my wife next that I remember the most. And it might be because I'm in the industry. It might be because I have this on my mind regularly, like every working day. But she stood by my bedside, and I said, this is where more or less the first words that come out my mouth, after I'd sworn, obviously, because I wasn't that pleased. This is where the life insurance policies are. This is where the critical illness policies are. This is who you need to contact. And then, things happen in hospital, and, they start moving you around and doing what they've got to do. But it was only later on, some months later and after I come out of hospital, that I sort of reflected on how fortunate I was to be able to say those words. We know how few people are protected. A third of people have life insurance. 1 in 10 have critical illness cover. 6% of people have income protection. Yet I was able to lay in that bed with all that was going on and say to my wife, it's going to be all right. And when I thought about this subsequently, I thought, I was fortunate to say it, but 2, it sort of relieved the pressure, because whether I died or whether I recovered, I knew right in that moment, the freedom of knowing that my family, the people I love most in the world, would not be financially struggling. And I cannot imagine what it would be like in that circumstance for that to happen and still be worrying about money. In fact, I know people it's happened to, and they've got to worry about paying the mortgage. They've got to worry about covering the children's bills and paying for debts and gas and electricity and everything else. I could almost release it entirely and go, the only thing I've got to do now is get better. I've just got to focus all of myself on getting better. And not minutes after that, this is the reality of when these things strike. It's not like casualty or anything. When these things happen, there's life kicks in. My wife had to leave me in the intensive care unit in the hospital I was in to pick up my youngest daughter from childcare because we had no one else to do it. We'd never a single soul, because of family and work commitments, everything, around to do it. We couldn't just leave her there. You know what they're like if you leave children in those environments. So she had to leave me. And my daughter, when she was talking to me, we talked to her about it afterwards when I got better. We talked about the things and how she felt, so she wasn't bottling them up. And she goes back to a couple of moments that upset her. And one of the moments that upset her was my wife turning up to pick her up, because that was my job. I did that as one of my responsibilities. I drop her off, I pick her up. And she goes, her exact words, she goes, I could tell Mummy had been crying. She tried to hide it, but I could tell, because kids always can. Yeah. But it gets a happy outcome, Yeah. 6 days before I had the brain hemorrhage. 6 days before, my late brother, sadly, had been diagnosed 3 months earlier with cancer. And so I thought, well, he had a 5-hour chemotherapy, right? And I thought, well, I'll go and cheer him up. Yeah, can't be good, can it? 5 hours chemotherapy. Wi-Fi signal's terrible, right, in that hospital. We'll go there and cheer him up. And I started talking to the nurses there. And they said, I said, how many people are you seeing today? It was 68.
Oh my goodness.
And well, one day, 68 people in one day in one hospital.
With one condition.
Yeah,
that's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. With one condition. I thought 68 people. So 7 of those have got critical illness going. Right? What do all the others do? Yeah. So, I was lucky. I was fortunate. They rushed me off to a specialist hospital in London. And I tell you what, if you ever want to be grounded about anything that in life, really, it sort of changed me subsequently. But if you ever want to be grounded, I ended up in the intensive care unit for the brain for brain injuries in Romford Hospital. And next to me, there's only 7 people in it. You have a nurse who sits at the end of your bed and just watches you 24 hours a day. Right? Opposite me was a young lad, early 20s, with his parents either side of the bed, and he'd been in a car accident. Next to me was a lad being suctioned every hour on the hour. I felt healthy. Right? I felt healthy. And as I said earlier, if you ever want to feel that death, illness is utterly indiscriminate, those go, it won't happen to me. I could have been one of those. It won't happen to me. That completely changes there. Absolutely changes.
No, but your whole perception and world around gratitude changes on the back of that, because we talk about the pressures of life, don't we? Every day we're trying to do things are happening at 1,000,000 miles an hour, different paces, social media, all those types of things. And often some of those coping mechanisms for well-being is to try and practice gratitude, isn't it? Yeah. People. But when something like that happens to you, you're grateful, aren't you? So I'm sort of hearing that. And of course, with your brother's scenario as well, that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And I'd love to be all zen about this, right? And go, do you know what? When I was in hospital, I've done mindfulness. I'm all right. I work with I've worked with a mental health charity. It's fine. But there are times in hospital where it's very hard. I mean, I won't get into detail because nobody wants to know, but some horrible things happen to you in hospital. Just the things they've got to do to you, the investigations they've got to do. And some of them are horrendous. They take away your dignity. I wasn't able to sit up for 2 weeks. So you can imagine what that comes with. And I don't want to make this depressing because it's a great story, really. But the first full night I was down in London, and this is important. It's important for me, is that I can't tell you, I cannot even put on a scale the pain that I felt. They say 0 to 10. How do you feel 0 to 10? I just wanted to say 11. But male ego kicked in and I went, oh, an 8. Right. But it wasn't. It was horrendous. And I didn't know how I was going to get through the night. And I was doing it, and I liken it to runners. Runners, when they're struggling, they go, I'm going to run from this lamppost to the next lamppost. And I run from that one to the next lamppost. And by the end, then I get to the end of the race. Right. And I was going, if I can get to this minute, I can get to the next minute. Right. It was, I can feel it now. But one thing that was on my mind, there's only one thing got me through that night. Family. It's the only thing I was thinking of.
It gets you through, doesn't it? It's got you through.
Yeah, and I was thinking, what do I want to happen? Back to aspirations again.
Yeah.
I want to be around for them. Look at the sacrifices they make for me. I want to be able to make those sacrifices for them, which I did financially, but I still want to be around to do. It's decided actually that I really did want to die. Yeah. I remember that moment going, I know it sounds really daft. I really don't want to die. I remember distinctly thinking that. And so you think about what that means to them as on top of just feeling emotional. My eldest daughter stopped working, sat by my bedside for 3 weeks every day with a laptop. So she stopped working, but she sat by my bedside every day for 3 weeks. In fact, to the extent that the hospital thought I had a fancy woman because she's a fair bit older than my youngest daughter, which apparently isn't uncommon in the hospital, until my wife arrived at the same time. My wife's 70 miles away, looking after our youngest child and trying to work and trying to come and see me in a ward where they didn't let my youngest in. They wouldn't let her in. It's too serious stuff. So they didn't let anyone under 12 in the ward. So you're trying to balance all of that. And they're doing all that for me. Why wouldn't I want to look after them?
I was thinking as well, that's 70 miles away.
Yeah.
That's, and to visit every day. And I'm just now even thinking of like the practicalities. So you're obviously the emotional impact of everything going on for your wife, looking after the kids, and trying to make sure you're okay. But then also then a 70-mile car journey there and back. And I'm just still thinking the cost of that, as well as the emotional and the kind of time impact. That's huge. Overnight. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Overnight, that's just changed.
And if you think about it on the longer term perspective, so if I'd been in there even longer, if I'd needed long-term support and care, and there was people in that hospital who were there months. I mean, I was really lucky. I was fortunate. But there were people in there who were there months and months and months. So you think of that on a longer scale. You think when your money runs out, how does the visit even look? So one guy opposite me, and he'd almost had no one visit them. Not because he didn't have people, because he couldn't afford to. Coming down from up north is a specialist hospital. And well, that's not. Let's go right back to our start of our conversation again. Is that your aspiration? Was your aspiration that if you're in a hospital, no one could visit you? Was it your aspiration that your family would struggle to pay financially to even put petrol in the car, let alone think about childcare? Because my wife's situation had to change dramatically as well. She's now to pick a child up and drop her off and do all the things that entails.
The thing is that the usual person in the street and even the advisor isn't aware of that impact and those costs and those elements and that emotional toll it takes on you.
Yeah.
And I suppose the art with the advisor is how do you have that conversation from that aspirational point and those potential things happening without delving too much into the what if, like you said earlier on.
Yeah. Well, I think when you get someone's aspiration and you understand why and what it is about that, so you get the meaning that sits underneath it. It's not understanding, I just want to stay in my home. What is it about what you're staying in your home? Yeah, I want to stay in my home. But when your words about why you want to stay, that's the important bit. But then that's the easy bit without having to go the what if. Because what you're trying to avoid is the what if by protecting yourself. You say, well, it's really simple. Well, what have you got in place that does the job? That's the what if. You don't have to go, how would you feel if you couldn't? What have you got in place to do the job? Well, you said you want this. You've only got that. Should you do something about it?
And the risk, like you say, if you go down that road of what if that happens, how do you feel, is that people then bury their head in the sand again, because that's what they do anyway, because it's human nature, as we've already spoken about.
Yeah, bad news.
Yeah, so right, no, I can't think about that.
Yeah.
Because it's too traumatic maybe for them.
Well, traumatic, and sometimes there's too many choices. People get really
you're right.
Choices, a paradox in it. It's stagnant, isn't it?
Especially if you're not familiar with something. And it's in that sort of financial services sort of bucket where, I don't know anything about that, so I'll switch off. I'm not quite sure what to do. Too many choices. Can I deal with the one thing, the mortgage or the investment or whatever it is?
It's another thing though, and it's that we forget that, especially in the mortgage space, I found this is our clients just want the home. So when they're sat in front of you, and I definitely found this sometimes, they'd be so nervous to tell me that they didn't have a plan B. They'd be so nervous to get to that decision in principle and get an accept. They'd think, the bank's not going to lend me the money if I don't have all these plans and I don't sound like I've got it together and I know what I'm doing. And actually sometimes I found I just had to take them right back and say, your mortgage is completely approved. It makes no difference whatsoever. I'm now looking at the risks here and what could happen at some point. How do you want it to look? And that sometimes just relaxes them. So I think unless you get to the root cause of why they're answering you the way that they are, you can't ever move past it. And I definitely found fear of not getting the mortgage was definitely something that they thought, because it makes them sound, as you said, maybe that they weren't sensible enough or weren't smart enough to have looked into this before.
But who does?
And this is the thing, you don't, do you? What was your wife? I'm interested about it, because I've not actually asked you this before in our conversations. But what was your wife's feeling on the cover? Because you were the financial advisor, so you obviously knew and set it up.
Yeah.
But have you ever spoken about what her view was when you told her that, and you said, the cover is here and this is what it does?
Well, she's about as interested in life and critical illness cover and income protection as anyone who doesn't work in the industry, which is not interested at all. For all the reasons we've spoken about. I don't think. Well, I'm pretty sure. It's a good question, by the way. That she thought it would pay out, because I recovered, and I recovered about as quick as you can recover from these things. And I'm in a small percentage of people that don't have any long-term effects from it. I mean, really lucky, really lucky. So when I got told it was going to pay out, I was just about to go and do a really quite large Teams call on the subject we're talking about. And I saw the call from L&G, and I thought, oh, please pay out, because I'm just about to go on a call for it. Yeah. So I want to feel motivated. I want to feel like we do everything that we said. I want to feel that we deliver on our promises. So I got the call, and I said, we're paying out. And I had a few minutes. So my wife was in the bathroom. So I went to my wife and said, L&G paying out. It's this much. And she looked a bit surprised, because there I was stood there. And so I went back, did the meeting. A little later on, I went downstairs, and she's in the kitchen working, and she's suspiciously quiet. All right, so I thought, something, what have I done? Something's up. And I just said, "Are you all right, darling?" And it was a big point. I remember, and it sort of gets me a bit when I think about it. And she said, "I still wish none of this had happened though." And right there, sort of feel, right there, you go, that's it, isn't it? That's what we do in a nutshell. No one wants it to happen. There's no one go, great.
I'm getting goosebumps with that. You don't want it to happen. That's it's never going to take it away. What we do, or what we can do, but as you say, it helps with makes things more palatable and easier to get through.
Yeah, it would have been so easy, wouldn't it, for her to go, right, we've bagged this much cash and you look fairly okay now.
Well, I thought you were going to say she was booking a holiday and she was quiet, Barry.
Well, that as well. But we talk about the mortgage so much. But the mortgage is just how much of your monthly expenditure is your mortgage, right? For some, it's greater than others. But then it's the stuff over and above that. And if you understand aspirations, people don't just say, I want to pay my mortgage. I think, I want this, I want that. So it makes that whole conversation around providing them with more cover and additional cover an easier one to have. Because my first thought, like everyone else I know who's ever had a payout and everyone L&G's spoken to, is, right, well, let's go and have some fun now. You talked about gratitude earlier, didn't you? And you go, well, hang on, let's not just sit there and do nothing. Let's go on holiday. Let's do this. Let's plan this. And it's lovely, and I can sit here as an employee of Legal & General, and it's only helped my job role. It's only helped what I do. It's only given me, I always had passion for this, but it's given me more passion to go, look, I took policies out with Legal & General. And they did what they said they'd do. I mean, to such an extent, my oldest policy ran out while I was in hospital. Right? So it ran out while I was in hospital. It was for an old mortgage, and I'd kept it going because I saw the value in having additional cover. And it's so easy when circumstances change to cancel policies, isn't it? And I've had lots of people, when I've been talking about it, come up to me now and go, I cancelled a policy and this happened to me. Subsequently, I really wish I hadn't. They're in what if land again. And you never want to be in what if land, do you? The world is full of what ifs. What if I went to the gym more? What if I ate healthier? What if I studied harder? All those things. The what if you don't want is, what if, or I wish I had. People don't want, I wish I had critical illness cover. They don't want that regret on the other end of what if. Or worse still, the people you love and leave behind going, I wish they'd had life insurance. I wish the person. So L&G delivered. And they delivered. And you know what? Not only did they deliver, the policy ran out in hospital. They paid the back premiums from when I was diagnosed and gave me interest. You know, I know it sounds daft, and I've told thousands of advisors and customers that we do that. You know, we'll take the date of the diagnosis and we'll pay it back then from then. But they did that. And they said, we had the money a bit longer than we should have done, so here's some interest. Oh, and we're paying out like we said we would. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. And then it gives you freedom, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like thinking about some of the conversations we've had about giving a choice, freedom, just having that flexibility in a time that's really inflexible, but given a bit of control in a time that you don't have much. It's interesting because I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about making daily decisions that your future can thank you for. Yeah. And it's definitely that, isn't it? But I think from an advisor point of view, a person in the moment suffering point of view, but also the family's point of view, like that decision in the moment is either one that you'll thank yourself for or not. And that's a really fine balance, isn't it, for both the advisor's point of view and the customers.
So a lovely way to look at it. What would future you say? People are really bad behaviourally at putting themselves in the future. Again, back while they don't have pensions and things. They just get there and see if we'll do all right. But what would you thank yourself for? You know, it's a lovely way to look at it. And I can sort of sit there and go, look, we've all done things we'd rather not do in life, and go, oh, God, tell me what I do. I drink less when I was in mid-20s, that sort of thing. But it's painful having stuff taken away from you. You said people don't like pain.
People are tempted into things. What I mean by that is that so many things are happening now. People are getting ill and dying. As we get older, it feels like there's more and more, doesn't there? And so people think, right, well, I value for the now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that holiday. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Yeah. But then that puts the what would you thank yourself for in the future further away. Yeah. So they focus on the now. And it is a balance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But it's such a key thing to be able to ask someone that. What would the future you thank you for?
Yeah.
What would you have in place? What would you like to happen?
Yeah, and sometimes you have to go back. You know, if you speak to your customers and say, okay, what are the significant life events that have happened to you in the last 5, 10 years? Write them down. And you'll be surprised how many events that they've had that actually could, by just even revisiting them, shape the way they think about their future. Yeah, even more so now, I think, live for now, right, and all of that. But you've got to have a mind on, well, I don't know what's tomorrow. We on our claims last year, we had a life insurance policy pay out after 1 day. We had an income protection policy pay out after 8 days. We had a critical illness policy pay out after 13 days. Now, I'm sure those people, or the people they're left behind as a consequence, aren't punching the air like I wasn't going, yes, you know. But I tell you what, when life settles, when life moves on a bit, they will not reflect that was the best decision they ever made. And you imagine at the other end of that, there was almost certainly a really, really good advisor who cared, who showed understanding, who thought logically about their situation and brought it to life in a way that customer made a decision that 1 day later we paid out. And they will reflect that's probably one of the best decisions they ever made. Because the pain of having things taken away is horrendous. No one likes pain. We all move away from pain and bad news. And when I left hospital, they sit you down. It's laying down, but they sit you down and they tell you all the things you can't do, right? And you've just got that bit. The day you're looking forward to more than anything else, and they go, right, just let you know these things. Like a list, you know, right? You can't drive. Come on, you can't drive. Don't do anything fast. Don't go on roller coasters. Don't do exercise. I used to exercise all the time, still do now. Don't exercise, certainly don't go to the gym, just be really careful. Don't get your heart rate up too high. Don't have mummy and daddy time. So everything, everything taken away from you. And it rots your soul. I went out of that hospital rather than feeling elated, felt because things are taken away. And the word the consultant said to me, is you've got to mourn the old you and reinvent a new one. Just think about that for a minute. You've got to mourn the old you and reinvent the new one. And it went through me like a sword at the time. And then when I reflected, I thought, well, maybe I understand what you're saying now. You've got to think of yourself differently. Again, fortunately, I've been able to adapt and get back to where I was. But you think about the things that would be taken away from you if you weren't protected. You think about all the freedoms that we take money for granted. We take our income for granted. We take our jobs for granted. You think about those things that if you didn't have those, that money coming in on a regular stream would be taken away, let alone the nice things. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And something, I mean, I'll share it with you, but something that happened, which I haven't told many people about. I was only out of hospital for one day. And I got back home, and my wife, being in the NHS, went, "You're not well. You're not right." And I went, "I'm all right. You're not getting me back in hospital. Are you mad?" "No, you're not." So she rang up a doctor and handed the phone to me. And the doctor asked me a few questions. And the doctor went, "Go back to hospital." And we had to relive it all over again. And so I got rushed into the local A&E. And it turned out while I was in the London hospital and they were digging around in the brain and everything else, I caught meningitis. So I spent another 2 weeks in isolation in another hospital. In the end, I signed myself out. I was going that stir crazy, locked in a room. And my family went through it all over again. I couldn't see my daughter for another 2 weeks. Again, I'd seen her one day. And it, as if to ram home again, loss, pain. What would they be in? What situation would they be in again? Before you come out and rehabilitate yourself. So you don't, even I then didn't know what was around the corner. None of us can guess tomorrow. So why don't we just take all the worry, the stress, the pain out of it and make sure that we're protected so that if those things happen, your family, the people you love, get everything you want them to and meet the aspirations.
That is scary, isn't it? That worry that must have been at that moment. Goodness me.
I think I swore a lot.
Yeah,
I can't imagine what you were thinking when you were going back in. How frightened you were.
Well, my daughter, my youngest, when she talks about it, she got upset about two things. The one I mentioned earlier, which is when mum turned to pick her up from school and not me. And the other one is that moment when I'm on a stretcher, they knock me. It was a bit like a scene from Casualty. It really was. They knock you through the doors. They go in there. And you know how tactile doctors' consultants are, aren't they, and surgeons? And the consultant came up to us, and we're one end of the hallway. My wife one side, me laying down on the trolley, my little girl the other side. And he stopped, he pointed at my little girl and went, "She's not coming in." So my poor little girl, poor Matilda, stood there, like stone. My wife walked a few more steps, stood there. I'm still being pushed. She just seeing me disappear through some double doors. I'm going, "I'll be all right." Tears rolling down her face. A lineup of people watching it like a tennis match, because it's A&E and there's always people everywhere. And you think they're the moments that you could never imagine would happen. But I'm talking about this as it's not doom, it's not gloom, because it's not about death, it's not about illness. This is about life. And what gets missed sometimes, people think it's a scary conversation. You'll have heard advisors build themselves up into it, wouldn't you? And you get to it, and by the time they're tenser than the customer is. But if you see it as your duty, if you see it as you're doing something that will reward the customer for something in a way they may never know and may never appreciate at that moment in time, this is the best thing you'll ever do. This is why I've worked in lots of bits of energy. I've worked in investments, inheritance tax, all sorts of things. This is the one I feel truly passionate about, because you change people's lives.
You do.
You make people who've got no money have money, which is different from getting people who've got money to have more money, isn't it? This is the most positive conversation you'll ever have, because the outcome of it is so phenomenally helpful.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think you can tell that, Barry. I mean, even before you've been through all that you have. As I said, I've known you before that, and you know, in my past as an advisor, and seen what you do, and you've always been passionate, and I think that, you know, I'm sure many advisors listening would agree, and have probably been on your sessions, and I think thank you so much for spending time, I think, today to be vulnerable and really share your side of it.
Yeah, thanks, Barry.
Well.
I mean, yeah, as we said before, we've worked before. You've always had the passion, haven't you? Now it's just increased tenfold in a way, isn't it? Even though you had it anyway. It's just so great. Thank you for just being so open about it. Really.
No, it's really kind of you to have me along. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.